Welcome friends to this new lecture of soil science and technology, and today we will be starting from the slide where we left in the last lecture, that is calculation of particle density and bulk density. So, in the last lecture we started the bulk density, we defined the bulk density and also we defined the particle density. Remember, particle density is the density of the soil solid particles, whereas bulk density is the density of bulk soil. So, generally soil bulk density is variable, however soil particle density is more or less constant, and we generally take the value of 2.65 gram per cc for soil particle density, and but soil bulk density varies widely from one soil to another soil depending on their percentage of pore space or porosity. So, in the last lecture we talked about how to calculate the particle density. So, I showed you this example of a block contains solid and pore spaces. So, how we calculated the bulk density, and when we compress the solid particles to and there is no further pore spaces, and then how we calculated the soil particle density. So, we will be starting from there, and let us see what are the important implications of these density parameters as far as the soil physiochemical properties are concerned. So, there are several factors which affects the bulk density because it is variable. So, let us start with the soil texture. Obviously, you know, fine texture soils have lower bulk density than coarse texture soils, because in case of fine texture soil, let us consider this is a general, you know, there is a widespread confusion about this thing. So, let us consider there is a clay soil and there is a sandy soil. So, if you see the clay soil or clay aggregates, obviously there will be some macro aggregates, macropores, and which are larger in size, and obviously there will be some interrupt micropores, numerous micropores. However, in case of coarse sand grains, obviously there will be only macropores, there will be no interrupt micropores. So, as a result of that, the total porosity is always higher in case of clay soil than that of coarse grained soil. So, as a result of total porosity is quite high in case of fine textured soil, obviously the for a given weight of soil, obviously the bulk density will be higher in case of coarse texture soil, and the bulk density will be lower in case of light texture soil, in case of fine texture soil, because we know bulk density or dB equal to mass by volume of solid plus volume of pores. So, in case of clay aggregates, this volume of pores is quite higher than that of coarse sand grains. So, as a result of that, in case of fine texture soil, obviously the bulk density is lower. Okay. The second important aspect is soil structure. Obviously, the well aggregated soil have lower bulk density than that of poorly aggregated soil. As you can see here, this is a well aggregated soil, and you can see the pore spaces are well arranged. However, this is well graded, but there is a loose packing, and this is well sorted but tight packing. This is I am sorry, this is well sorted, but there is a loose packing. So, there are well graded and loose packing, and this is well sorted and tight packing. So, based on the packing arrangement, obviously the pore space or the volume of the pore space changes. So obviously in case of well aggregate soils have lower bulk density than poorly aggregated soils, because it depends on the pore space. Third is effect of organic matter. It is very important. Now, organic matter helps to form good aggregation, as you already know. So, it reduces the bulk density of the soil. When there will be good aggregation, obviously there will be larger porosity, and as a result of larger total porosity, the bulk density of the soil will be lower. Depth of soil profile is another important issue. Pore space reduces with the increase in soil depth. So, bulk density generally increase with increase in depth of the soil. So, in case of agricultural land, the long term vintage tillage, when you are doing the long term tillage using some heavy implements, obviously the soil bulk density generally increases, and because there are a couple of reasons. Because as a result of continuous tillage, the organic matter depletes, degrading the soil structure, and also due to the heavy pressure of the implements, there will be a compaction effect, and as a result of the compaction effect there will be formation of hard layers below the just in the subsoil. So, we call it plow pan, or as you can see here, there is a clear plow pan which is a hard and compacted layer which generated due to the heavy machinery, pressure due to the heavy machinery, and as a result this layer will have higher bulk density, and as a result of higher bulk density there will be problem for growth of the crop, because plant roots cannot grow further, and also the aeration as well as water movement will be impeded. So, these are some problem for increasing the bulk density in agricultural lands. Obviously, vehicle tires, for example, 750 kg load per tire will compact soil to about 50 centimeter, and obviously remember that the more narrow the tire, the deeper it sinks and deeper its compaction effect. As you can see the picture, the narrow tire providing is although it is 750 kg load, both the tire is giving 750 kg of load, but the deeper it sinks and deeper its compaction effect. So, in case of narrow tire, obviously it will give more compaction effect. So, summarily we have covered an important chapter of soil, that is soil tillage and soil density, and I hope that you have learned something new. We have discussed about different types of tillage, what are the benefits of conventional tillage, what are the drawbacks of what are the benefits of conservation tillage, and what are the drawbacks of conventional tillage, what is primary tillage, secondary tillage, and then we talked about soil crusting, their problems and how to manage soil crusting. Then we talked about soil bulk density and particle density, and how to calculate the soil particle density, bulk density, and what are the factors which affect the soil bulk density, because it is variable. Soil particle density is more or less constant, as you know. So, we have hopefully gathered, hopefully you have gathered a good knowledge about soil density and tillage operations. So, if you need more information or more knowledge, please go through the book called The Nature and Properties of Soil, written by Brady et al. So, you will have more idea about the soil tillage and other practices. So, that is all from this. And also, I want to mention that there is also influence of bulk density on soil strength and root growth. As you can see that soil strength is increased when a soil is compacted to a higher bulk density, and also when finer texture soils dry out and harden. So, it can easily restrict the growth of the root. As you can see here in this graph, as the soil water content is going down from 0.50 per 100 grams to 0.20 gram per 100 grams of soil, obviously the penetrometer reading, which basically measure the strength requires for penetrating the soil is continuously increasing. So, obviously for a given soil bulk density, reducing the moisture content would increase the the penetrometer reading, or in other words it will increase the restriction for proper root growth, and will, or in other words if we decrease the soil water content, it will provide hindrance for root growth or proper root proliferation. So, uh, also the effect of soil texture is important. The more clay present in a soil, the smaller the average pore size and the greater the resistance to penetration at a given bulk density than a sandy soil. You know all that. And obviously effect of land use and management, as you can see, as you know that crops are grown sometime in rows. So, when we grow the crops in rows, there are chances for increasing the soil bulk density. So, obviously we should practice some intercropping. So, these are some management practices for soil bulk density. So, let us start a new topic, that is soil porosity and consistency. It is also very important. These are also very important soil physical parameters. So, let us start, and basically in this chapter we will cover what is soil porosity, and then what are the factors which affect soil porosity, and then we will cover soil consistency and consistency. So, what is soil porosity? Well, soil porosity refers to the percent of soil volume occupied by pore spaces. And remember that total pore space include both air and water filled pores. So, in the first lecture we have talked about the volume distribution of different fraction of soil or different components of a soil. There you have learned that about 50% of the soil total volume is occupied by the pore space, which is also, and these pore spaces are shared mutually by air and water. And that the ideal soil, remember that an ideal soil would have a total porosity of 50% with equal amount of air and water filled pore spaces. However, depending upon the condition, sometimes the air filled pores predominant, sometimes the water filled pores predominates. So, how do we calculate the porosity? So, let us see. So, we know that from our last lecture that bulk density or dB is basically calculated by this formula, which is weight of soil solids over volume of soil solids and volume of pores. And particle density or dP is basically weight of soil solids and volume of soil solids. So, we know all this. Only the difference in case of particle density and bulk density is, in case of bulk density we are also considering the volume of pore spaces. So, from equation 1 and 2, equating for Ws, or Ws basically the weight of soil solids, to get the soil solid, weight of the soil solid, which is Ws, from the bulk density. If we multiply the bulk density with the, if we multiply the particle density with the volume of the solids, we will get the weight of the soil solids, we know that. And also if we multiply the bulk density with the volume of solid and volume of pore spaces, we will get the Ws, that is weight of soil solids. So, basically these two are same. So, which basically implies Vs by Vs plus Vp equal to dP over dP. Now, we know that Vs over Vs plus Vp into multiplied by 100 is the percent of solid space, and we know that percent of pore space plus percent of solid space is always 100%, because solid space and pore space cover total 100% of the soil volume. So, if we replace the solid space by this expression, that is Vs by Vs plus Vp into 100, we will get percentage of pore space, that is 100% minus dP bulk density over particle density into 100. So, this is the percent pore space formula we generally use to calculate the porosity or percent pore space. So, if you see, these are two examples. The left one is a brick with higher bulk density and low pore space, and the right one is a sponge with low bulk density and high pore space. So, remember that when there is a high pore space, obviously that will show lower bulk density. Now, what are the factors which affect the total pore space? Let us discuss them one by one. First of all, the management practice. So, obviously you know that highly compacted soils have less porosity, because when you are compressing the soil solids, obviously there will be no further pore space. So, well granulated and organic matter rich soil have higher porosity. Remember that organic matter contains huge amount of micropores. So, when you are adding the organic matter, not only it producing the well aggregated soil, but also it increasing the total porosity, because total porosity is the combination of both macropores and micropores. Intense cultivation reduces the porosity due to reduction in organic matter content. Obviously, we know that there is a drawback of conventional tillage, and organic matter content increases the porosity. We have already discussed that. So, these are some management interventions which affect the percent of total pore space. So, as you can see from this picture, how compaction is affecting the total porosity. As you can see, the leftmost picture is showing the loosely aggregated soil. However, the next picture is showing highly compacted soil, and obviously in case of compacted soil, you will see there is an impervious layer through which the plant roots cannot grow further. So, these are example of compaction and its effects on porosity. Obviously, when you are compacting the soil, the total porosity will also decrease. The second important aspect is size of pores. So, obviously soil pores occur in wide varieties in size and shape, and this determines the role they play into the soil. Obviously, we will discuss them, and they are generally divided into two broad categories. One is macropores, another is micropores. So, let us see what are the macropores and micropores. So, if we classify the pores based on their size and their functions, let us see how we can classify them. So, at first you can see macropores. So, macropores are having effective diameter of 0.08 to 5 plus millimeter, and micropores are further divided into 4 classes. One is mesopore, micropores, ultramicropores and cryptopores. So, mesopores are basically 0.03 to 0.08 millimeter diameter. Micropores are 0.005 to 0.03 millimeter diameter. Ultramicropores contain 0.001 to 0.005 millimeter diameter, and cryptopores are having diameter less than 0.0001 millimeter. Now, in case of macropores, they basically generally found in between the soil beds or interped regions, and basically water drains through these macropores by gravity, and effectively they can transmit air, and they are also large enough to accommodate plant roots and habitat for certain soil animals. Now, regarding the mesopores, they basically retain water after drainage and transmit water by capillary action, accommodate fungi and root hairs. We have already covered we have already seen that how these root hairs and fungi helps in aggregation of soil aggregates. So, these fungi and root hairs basically accommodate in the mesopores. Micropores generally found within the beds entrapped, we have seen already in the last couple of slides. It basically retain water that plant can use. However, they also accommodate more bacteria, or most bacteria they have in those macropores. Ultramicropores found largely within the clay groupings and retain water, but that water plant cannot use, and they basically exclude most of the microorganisms, and in case of cryptopores they exclude all the microorganisms too small, and they are too small to for large molecules to enter. And remember that this classification is given by Soil Science Society of America in 2001. So, we can basically divide the pores based on their diameter into two broad categories, macropores and micropores, and micropores are further divided into four groups, that is mesopores, micropores, ultramicropores and cryptopores based on their relative size or diameter of the pore spaces. Okay. So, let us discuss them one by one. Effective diameter in case of macropores are greater than 0.08 millimeter, and macropores readily allow the movement of air and water, and it accommodates the plant root system and animals. We have already discussed that. So, let us see what are the types of macropores, and there are different, you can see in the pictures there are two different types of macropores. Macropores in between individual soil grains, you can see here, these are macropores which are present individual in between individual soil grains, and these are responsible for movement of air and water in sandy soil. So, you will see these type of macropores mostly present in case of sandy soil, and entrapped pores in well structured soil. Obviously, these are some entrapped pores which are not highly visible, but they are present in well structured soil, and they also occur between tightly packed blocky pads and also called prismatic pads. So, we have already known what are pads and what is prismatic pads. So, as you can see in this in between this prismatic pad, they are tightly they occur in between these tightly packed prismatic pads, and these are also these are also macropores. And also there is another macropore called biopores. So, biopores is a type of macropores which are created by roots, earthworms and other animals, and you can see they are tubular in shape and they are continuous. And in clay soil, biopores are major pores for facilitating plant root growth, and both soil structure and texture influences the distribution of micro and macropores. And as you can see here, these are the biopores. These are tubular in shape and continuous, and also here you can see the biopores, and obviously these biopores are the major pores for facilitating plant root growth in case of clay soils, because in clay soils availability of macropores are somewhat limited. Micropores effective diameter is less than 0.08 millimeter, and they retain water in field condition, but too small for air movement. However, most of the water is not readily available to the plant. Remember that is why in case of clay soil, although they can hold more water, water holding capacity is quite high, but the water supply capacity is not optimum in case of clay soil. So, these water are not readily available for the plants. Small micropores known as nanopores acts as a hiding place for adsorbed pollutants and organic materials. So, size, shape and interconnection of pores is important rather than the volume of the pores. So, if you see the volume distribution of soil aggregates and pores in good structured soil, you can see that obviously the organic matter percentage will go down as we go from surface soil to subsurface soil. Obviously, the organic matter percentage will go down. The sand percentage will remain more or less same. The silt percentage will always remain more or less same. The clay will generally increase as we go down. You can see there is a stark increase of micropores as we are going down from the surface soil, and vice versa for the macropores. Macropores are going to decrease as we are going down into the soil profile. So, again as we are going down into the soil profile, the micropores will increase and macropores will decrease, and also the organic matter will decrease. Alright. Another important aspect is cultivation and pore size. So, continuous cropping reduces the soil organic matter. So, uh, also as a result of continuous cropping, the macropores reduces. So, we need to practice conservation tillage. This conservation tillage promotes long lived network of biopores and they increases the macroporosity of the surface layer, which is important for the growth of the plant. Now, let us see another important aspect, physical property of soil, that is called soil consistence. Now, by soil consistent we mean that the ease with which the soil can be reshaped or ruptured. As you can see, we are molding the soil, we can mold the soil to in different shape. So, soil consistent basically is defined as the ease with which the soil can be reshaped or ruptured. So, soil consistence provides a means of describing the degree and kind of cohesion and adhesion between the soil particles as related to the resistance to their soil to deform and rupture. Obviously, by soil consistence it is a manifestation of adhesive and cohesive properties of soil. You know, the adhesion occurs between the similar cohesion occurs between the similar molecules, whereas addition occurs in different molecules. So, these addition and cohesion manifestation basically occurs through the soil consistence, and since the consistence varies with the moisture content, the consistence can be described as either dry consistence or moist consistence and wet consistence. We will discuss all of them in details later on. What is rupture resistance? So, rupture resistance basically is the measure of the strength of the soil to withstand an applied stress, and moisture content is also considered, as you know, that we generally consider moisture content, two types of moisture content, one is dry, another is moist moisture content, which is generally a field capacity. So, rupture resistance is an important aspect for soil consistency. So, let us see wet consistency. We will be focusing more on wet consistency, we will not discuss in details in dry consistency. If you are interested, you can see some literature for dry soil consistency, but let us focus on wet consistency. So, wet consistency is basically expressed in terms of two parameters, one is stickiness, another is plasticity. So, stickiness is basically the capacity of soil to adhere to other objects, and it is estimated at moisture content that displays maximum adherence between the thumb and forefinger. So, if we take the soil and in between thumb and forefingers, we can measure the stickiness of the soil, which is also express a degree of soil consistency. Another important is soil plasticity, which is a degree of soil. Degree a soil can be molded or reworked, causing permanent deformation without rupturing. So, this is called soil plasticity or plastic nature of soil. So, there are several stickiness classes. You can see 4 different stickiness classes. One is non-sticky, then slightly sticky, then moderately sticky and very sticky. So, slightly sticky means little or no soil adherence to fingers after release of pressure. In case of slightly sticky, you will see soil adheres to both fingers after release of the pressure with little stretching or separation of the fingers. In case of moderately sticky, you will see the soil adheres to both fingers after release of the pressure with some stretching on separation of the fingers, and very sticky soil adheres firmly to both fingers after release of pressure which stretches greatly on separation of the fingers. So, these are different stickiness class based on how they will stick in between thumb and forefingers, and obviously you can see in this picture the first one is non-sticky, the second one is slightly sticky and the third one is very sticky. So, let us wrap up here, and in the next lecture we will start from soil plasticity and different plasticity in this Atterberg limits and all other important aspects for measuring soil consistency. Thank you very much.